Welcome to Talkin SEC. Writer, photographer, and producer Phillip Jordan discusses all the latest in college football in the Southeast with the best analysts around. Now from the southeast corner of Alabama, a state that knows sports, here is Phillip Jordan.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Talking SEC. I'm your host, Phillip Jordan from Last Word on College Football at 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer, Dothan Wolves Football. Got a fun show planned for you guys today on this Thursday. I'm going to be joined by Palmer Thombs from DawgsHQ. We are going to recap the Georgia Spring, and then after that, a couple SEC-related items I'm going to talk about. My conversation with Palmer goes about 28 minutes long. We do talk about JT Daniels going to West Virginia. Why does Stetson Bennett still not getting the respect he deserves after leading the national title? The tight ends galore for Georgia, and who are going to be the new stars on the defense. Before jumping into all that, let you guys know you can find me in the podcast. You can find me on social media at PJordanSEC. Podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. And also, you can check out the show on YouTube. There's two locations for that, the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel and the Talking SEC YouTube channel. Go to either one of those pages, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. And if you leave a comment, I will read those on the show as well. You can always email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Now, let's recap the Georgia Spring with Palmer Thombs from DawgsHQ. All right, everybody. We are now going to talk about the defending national champions, Georgia Bulldogs, which I know a lot of you out there probably thought those words would never be said, but we are going to talk about who will be the defending champions this coming up year of college football. And to do so, most of the time when I talk Georgia Bulldogs, I hit up my guy Palmer Thombs from DawgsHQ. And Palmer, I appreciate you taking time and coming on the show today to talk about Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, Phillip, of course, happy to come on. And, was an exciting G-Day, exciting spring to just see the, like you said, defending national champions back on the field. First time that they've suited up in pads in front of a crowd, at least at Sanford Stadium, since they brought home the title. And so fans were excited, the players were excited, and, of course, I was excited to see it too.
Yeah, good crowd. The third highest attendance is what I read somewhere, over 68,000 there. So get to see the Bulldogs get those rings. Pretty impressive looking championship rings the players got as well.
Yeah, no rings for the media, no love there. But they those were some pretty looking rings. I know Georgia fans of sports in the state of Georgia at least have gotten a taste of two rings this last couple of weeks, with the Braves getting theirs a couple weeks ago, and of course Georgia getting theirs on Saturday. So beautiful rings. Wish I had one myself.
The media gets no respect. I mean, just as important to the championship run as the team was. I mean, you guys are fans,
It wouldn't have been the same if the media hadn't hated on Stetson Bennett or created this controversy.
Oh, you're talking about the West Virginia quarterback now up there?
Yeah.
I wouldn't plan on asking about him, but I just got to throw it out there. Talking about JT Daniels. Of course, he last week announced he's transferring to West Virginia, which I think was them, Missouri, and Oregon State. Just obviously a guy that's really good when he's on the field. I mean, he had some bad luck with some injuries, USC and then at Georgia. If there's anybody out here, West Virginia fans watching, from a guy that, obviously watched him play, covered Georgia. What are they getting if they're getting 12 games of JT Daniels?
Man, they're getting a dynamic quarterback, somebody capable of stretching the field. Like you said, JT has this injury history, only in 4 games in 2020 because he came to Georgia with injury that he suffered previously at USC. It was a little bit limited there as well, missed some time even during his freshman season there. But, this past season, it was different injuries that kept him out, and it was smaller ones. Wasn't the torn ACL that kept him out, that second season at USC and the majority of his third season playing college football, his first at Georgia in 2020. But, I think that 4-game stretch at the end of that season certainly showcased what he's capable of as a quarterback. There was a reason he was so highly recruited. Former number 1 player in the 2019 class before he decided to reclassify to 2018. And at that point, he was the number 3 quarterback behind 2 guys that are suiting it up on Sundays now, Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. So I think, then 2021 rolls around. He plays in a couple of games, started against Clemson, missed UAB, started against South Carolina and Vanderbilt, missed Arkansas. And that was kind of the end of JT Daniels, at least as a starter at Georgia. So, we saw JT start 7 games at Georgia. And in each of those games, I felt like, maybe with the exception of the Clemson game, because of the way that defense played Georgia, I felt like Georgia's passing attack was at its finest. And so, I think that's what JT brings to the table, the ability to stretch the field, get downfield, an accurate passer, not somebody that's going to extend plays with their legs. I think that's ultimately why Stetson Bennett ended up, holding on to that job, because he was capable of doing so many things, not just with his arm. But JT certainly, quality quarterback, and I wish the best for him at West Virginia. Excited to watch him play, because I think he's an exciting football player, and didn't really look like he was going to get that chance again at Georgia.
Yeah, because it's obviously, you watch the spring game. Stetson Bennett's the guy at Georgia. He's the quarterback. It just feels like, despite winning the national championship, kind of joked about the controversy or whatever, with last year with Stetson Bennett and JT Daniels, that going back and forth between the two. Why do you think there's maybe still some people out there that are kind of questioning Stetson Bennett?
I think when on paper, absolutely, on paper, he's the least talented quarterback in this quarterback room, because you've got a former 5-star in Brock Vandagriff, local kid that everyone's rooting for, a high 4-star, Elite 11, Mr. Football winner in the state of Florida in Carson Beck, and then a Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Georgia, high 4-star again in Gunnar Stockton. So, I think that on paper, the former walk-on is definitely the least talented of those guys. But it's what he does on the field that separates him. To me, I think it's some of those, checks that he makes at the line of scrimmage, that he's, in his 6th year now playing college football, 5th at Georgia. He understands what it's like. He's gotten those game reps. To me, Stetson Bennett is a gamer. He's a guy that's going to show up when the lights are brightest. Showed that in the college football playoff. Didn't necessarily show that, in the SEC championship, didn't have his best game, but it wasn't the worst I've seen Stetson Bennett play. Still had over 300 passing yards against Alabama in that game. The defense just did them no good. And so, to me, the way to win with Stetson Bennett is to limit the amount that you put on him, as a passer. I think that he is best when Stetson Bennett is at his best when there's the threat of a run game there, and he works very well in the play action, and he can use his legs as a part of that play action too, to, maybe an RPO, to keep the ball sometimes. And take off as a runner. So, Stetson Bennett is at his best when Georgia doesn't put too much pressure on him as a passer. And I think that when fans look at quarterbacks, not only at Georgia, but at the professional level, across the country, whatnot, they want to see guys throwing the football, slinging it around, like what Bryce Young does at Alabama, what CJ Stroud does at Ohio State. That's not what Stetson Bennett is, but Stetson Bennett is a winner, and I think he showcased that. At G-Day, led the game-winning drive, but also this past season, last 2 seasons really at Georgia.
Yeah, just watching G-Day on TV, I could tell it's his team. He's the leader. But have you G-Day or anything else you've seen? Like maybe there is. You talk about a quarter just won a national championship, but you always want to improve. Every player wants to improve year. Have you seen, or do you think there's some stuff he has improved on from the end of the end of the season when they won the national title and then through spring?
I think he's just more comfortable, not having to look over his shoulder, look behind him and see JT Daniels. Not that there was any bad blood between those two. I think they actually had a very great relationship. But to know that Kirby Smart is completely bought into him, to know that Todd Monken as an offensive coordinator is completely bought into Stetson Bennett as the quarterback, to give him some of that freedom and the ability to do different things. That's what has made Stetson Bennett a better quarterback this spring than he was, in the past. It's the first time in that 6-year career. It's the first time that he's entered a season as a starter. And that's, even talking about a 2020 season where he had started the majority of games for Georgia. Coming in after that, in that 20 season, coming into 2021, he had started the majority of games for Georgia. Obviously, the way things ended then, JT Daniels was going to be the guy. And he looked, he was going to be the future of Georgia football, at least at the quarterback position. But we saw how things played out in 2021. This is Stetson's team. Kirby said that after the game. Stetson was not the best quarterback at G-Day, in my opinion. I thought that Carson Beck looked very good, at least on paper. And so, when fans might, call in to, and create this Bennett versus Beck controversy, Kirby came out and was asked about it and said, hey, are you willing to declare Stetson the starter? You did that last season with JT Daniels. Are you going to do that again with Stetson Bennett? And he said, look, you said it. Stetson knows where he stands with this team. This team knows where Stetson stands as our quarterback. They know he's our guy. And so to me, I think that says it's that confidence that these coaches have, that confidence that these players have in Stetson Bennett as a quarterback that's making him, making a huge difference for him as he jumps into a bigger role.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about Carson Beck, I was thinking about, as you were talking about him, that pass on his first possession, that 60-yard bomb he threw to Arian Smith. I mean, it was a beautiful pass. I mean, just over the shoulder. I mean, everything you want with a pass like that. And he was quite impressive. I think 14 to 26, 274 yards. I mean, I think all the quarterbacks were good for Georgia. I mean, I think if you're a Georgia fan, you can come away from that game and say, we're good at quarterback right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you can. And I think you probably have more confidence in your backup quarterback entering this season than you did last year, because this time last year, Carson Beck was QB2. And this time, this year, it's Carson Beck again as QB2, just with another year of development under his belt. Obviously, when it mattered the most and Georgia had to turn to a backup quarterback, they turned to Stetson Bennett over Carson Beck. But I think that's because, then it was because of the experience factor, not any sort of talent difference between the two. I think that Beck showed how talented of a quarterback he is. And that's exactly what you want as a backup, because I think that, but both him and Brock Vandagriff, very talented players. And I feel like, Georgia fans should know how important a backup quarterback is, both because they won a national championship with a backup quarterback and they've lost a national championship against a backup quarterback. They've lost an SEC championship against a backup quarterback. Georgia fans know how important that backup quarterback position is. And people joke that it's the favorite, player in town. Carson Beck is in a good position, great position in my mind, entering 2022 as QB2.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he's the favorite till he gets out there. And then it's, then it's different for him. Then the third guy, so on and so forth. And looking at it, I mean, I look at it. I mean, I think if you're Georgia, you should be worried. Obviously, running back is Georgia. They've got backs there with McIntosh and Milton there. And then receiver, I like, Blaylock and then, Kyrus Jackson. They're good. But at tight end, I mean, there's no team in the country, in my opinion, that's going to touch Georgia when it comes to tight end. I don't. I mean, how often do you think we're going to see Georgia come out there with 3 tight ends? Because and then Bowers and Washington, Darnell Washington, they didn't even play, but Eric Gilbert, having him in there now, a guy that you can put in the position of receiver. He is a tight end, but as lined up as a receiver, what we saw him 2 touchdowns. I mean, in the red zone, the weapon he is now. I mean, just the tight ends alone, and and I'll shut up and I'll let you give your thoughts in a second. But when I look at that, that's going to make the receivers' jobs even more easier, because what those guys can do in the middle, that's going to open up one-on-one coverage for your receivers on the outside and some stuff underneath for your running backs. Just the tight end talent, I think, and like I said, get your opinion on this, can open up so much for this Georgia offense.
No, I mean, you asked how much is Georgia going to come out with 3 tight ends on the field. I'm asking how much is Georgia going to come with 4 tight ends on the field.
True.
Because if you watch that spring game, Oscar Delp was just every bit as impressive as Brock Bowers was this time a year ago. And he's a true freshman coming into this fall. I'm not expecting a Brock Bowers type season out of Oscar Delp, but I think that if the situation was a little bit different and he wasn't sitting behind a Bowers, a Washington, a Gilbert, things might be, we might be talking about Oscar Delp as an All-American. So, to me, I think the question is, how often is Georgia coming out with 4 tight ends? Because like you said, those players just bring such a different dynamic to this game. As a big guys, you can have them in there. You can line them down with their hand in the dirt and they can block. You can split them out wide and they can, create a mismatch with a linebacker. They're too fast for a linebacker. They're too big for a corner. And so they are a huge asset for Georgia, not just Eric Gilbert, not just Brock Bowers, the entire room. I'd throw Brett Seether in there too. A ton of great opportunities for him this spring to develop as a tight end because he's been getting those opportunities with Bowers and Washington out this spring. So Georgia's going to have a ton of talent in that tight end room. They have a ton of talent. They're going to have a lot more experience in that tight end room entering 2022. And like you said, it just opens things up for those other pass catchers where Georgia is a little bit thinner. I think that it's not necessarily a concern because I think Georgia has guys capable of being a talented pass catcher. Like you said, Kyrus Jackson, A.D. Mitchell showed what he's capable of last season, had a big G-Day game last year, was a little bit more quiet this Saturday. But, I think a lot of that has to do with he's stepping into a much bigger role, being guarded by the number 1 corner instead of the number 2 or number 3 corner last year. Ladd McConkey is capable of big things. He only had 1 catch on Saturday, but we've seen Mitchell and McConkey both play receiver at a very high level in the SEC. Kyrus Jackson was the team leader in 2020. He was a little bit banged up in 2021, had a knee surgery late in July. So I don't think that he was fully comfortable, all throughout last season. He showed what he was capable of once again, reminded folks of what he's capable of at G-Day. Like we said, the tight ends, I think that there's a lot more guys. Dominic Blaylock, as he returns, that's a great story in the first place. The fact this guy's returning from 2 torn ACLs, if you're not a fan of Dominic Blaylock, you should be, because it's a great story to see him back out on the field. I think Arian Smith is a guy capable of being an impact player for Georgia. We showcased that speed. He showcased that speed on that first catch of the game, had several other catches as well. Finished with 3 catches for 83 yards. They've got playmakers. Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint is another guy that I didn't mention. Those running backs were very integral in that passing game on Saturday. With Kenny McIntosh finishing with 4 catches, Milton finishing with 1 for 32 and a touchdown through the air, and Dajan Edwards finishing with 3. So a combined 8 catches, over 100 yards for those 3 guys, your primary 3 running backs entering this fall. Those guys are capable of doing things in the passing game. I don't know that they'll be asked to do as much as they were asked to do in that spring game, because Georgia's going to want to ground and pound a little bit more than they did, in a spring scrimmage. But I think that, what we've seen is that those guys are capable of it. Those receivers are capable of making the catches. You're not going to see one guy stand out. You're not going to see, the top. You're not going to see the Biletnikoff winner coming from Georgia, unless Eric Gilbert lines up as a wide receiver, or they consider Brock Bowers a wide receiver. But even then, just because those guys are competing with each other for catches, I don't think that you're going to see one specific guy. But I think what you're going to see is several guys making an impact in that passing game, and it starts with those tight ends.
Just, you may not want to let Dominic Blaylock play quarterback. That might be the one thing you may not ask him to do. Well, that was fun to see on spring game. Let's jump into defense real quick. And we've been heavy into the offense. I mean, obviously, if most college teams lose 8 guys, starters off their defense or players off their defense, it is panic mode. How good is it? There's going to be a drop off. Look, the points per game may go up from what they were this past year.
It'd be tough to go down. Let's put it that way.
It really would be. But they're going to be good because the fact is they'll help Georgia. They were blowing out so many people. They got so many guys that got experience. I know Nolan Smith is one of the guys in that front seven that's back, which will be key, having him there. Jalen Carter up front, he looks like he's a stud. Just what is your takeaway, just, from the spring and all with this defense and where you can see? I mean, I'm not going to ask how good. I think everybody figures they're going to be really good. But just what's your takeaways with the Georgia defense through spring and going into the season?
Yeah, I would say that they are capable of being – a strong Georgia defense like we've come accustomed to under Kirby Smart. I don't know that they are there right now. They've got a lot of room to grow. But at the same time, I don't think that you would have expected them to be there after 15 spring practices. They've got a lot of holes to fill. Like you said, up front with Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, and Trayvon Walker going off to the NFL. Jalen Carter is stepping up and taking on a much bigger role, but he can't be the only guy. You've got to have Zion Logue. You've got to have Tramel Wealthauer, who didn't play on Saturday, was on the sidelines on crutches and in a knee brace. Kirby said he'll be back for the summer, but, to miss out on the opportunity for those reps. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins filled his spot and looked great in that, a young guy entering his second season. He's capable of making an impact. And Georgia's going to need more guys at that defensive end position because Trayvon played so many snaps, was the defensive lineman on for the most snaps. I don't know that you can ask one guy to do that and completely fill his role. So you're going to need multiple guys to do that, whether that's Wealthauer, whether that's Ingram-Dawkins, whether that's Mykel Williams, a five-star early enrollee that played some on Saturday as well. Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse, the list just goes on and on and on. And I think that that's what you want with this Georgia defensive line. Those guys got reps, but you can't, you're not going to be asking one specific guy to fill the shoes of Jordan Davis. You're going to be asking 2 or 3 guys to do that because, these guys are young. These guys are inexperienced, at least not as experienced as Jordan Davis was last season, coming back and having played so much under his belt. Same goes for Devontae Wyatt. You're going to be asking multiple guys. It's going to be a team effort to replace those guys. But I think Georgia has enough talent up front and at the outside linebacker position too on that edge. You mentioned Nolan Smith. Robert Beal didn't play on Saturday, but he was Georgia's sack leader last season. Maybe the most forgotten sack leader in Georgia football history because of those talented players that were around him. Beal was an impact player for Georgia. And he can be that again. Chaz Chambliss is a player that has developed and got a lot of good reps with the ones this spring with Beal a little bit banged up. So that edge in that, front seven is capable of helping things out where they might be a little bit weaker in the middle. They don't have a ton of depth at inside linebacker. And with 3 guys that played last season as much as they did in Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, and Channing Tindall, you're going to be seeing a lot of new faces out there. Jamon Dumas-Johnson had a great spring for Georgia and is stepping into a leadership role. You're seeing him. You saw him make a lot of plays last season in limited opportunities, and he's going to make more plays this year as he gets more opportunities. He's one of the guys that we've heard the most about this spring. We saw him. He led the team in tackles on Saturday. I'm expecting big things out of him. But, next to him, who is it going to be? Tresman Marshall was the guy next to him on Saturday. He's an experienced guy that just hasn't quite been able to stay healthy. Is he going to be able to do that this fall? For his sake, I hope so. And Xavier Sori, a former 5-star. Smile Munden, a former 5-star. Munden was banged up this spring. Sori got a lot of good reps because of Tresman Marshall being banged up. Marshall played through it, but he was banged up, limited from a season-ending injury last year. So Sori got a lot of good reps. Munden's going to have to make those up in the fall. He's going to have to be an impact player for them. So they've got the talent there, not to mention talented guys that are coming in like Jalen Walker. CJ Washington had a scary injury. Both of them are, top 100, 150 players. And they are capable of making impact when they get on the field. So I think that Georgia's again, it's going to be a group effort to replace those guys. You can't ask, none of these guys are going to step in and be Nakobe Dean, but you can ask them to collectively be Nakobe Dean. And I think that if I had any questions about Georgia's defense, it would be on the back end right now. And that's because of how much they lose there as well. But I think that the talent and, not to mention, so when I say how much they've lost there in the secondary, it's not just to the NFL draft, it's to the transfer portal as well. Georgia has seen a ton of players go to the transfer portal over the last several seasons, and the NFL draft as well. And so they are really young, really inexperienced. That was a position of need in the class of 2022 in the signing class. They addressed it, but they didn't quite have everybody there this spring to, send out onto the field for Saturday. So they're not deep in the secondary. They're inexperienced in the secondary. So the talent of those guys up front, the limited experience that they have of those guys up front, they're going to have to do things up front that helps the secondary grow and develop. It'll buy them time. It was the same case last year, though, because, they were dealing with a lot of turnover in the secondary last year. Chris Smith was stepping into a bigger role. They had new corners on both sides after Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell had left for the NFL draft. You were seeing Darian Kendrick come in as a transfer and Keely Ringo step up in his first year as a starter. They were replacing a star, because Mark Webb left. And so they had to replace him with Latavius Brini. Well, Brini ends up transferring, and now they're moving on to William Poole, who played a lot down the stretch for Georgia and played well down the stretch, probably why Brini ended up leaving. But again, a lot of inexperienced guys, so they are going to be, working with a younger group, certainly a less experienced group. And I think that what Georgia's going to have to do is they're going to have to make plays in the front seven where they have the talent and where they have a little bit more experience to help those guys on the back end.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like I said, you got Kirby Smart, you got Will Muschamp, you got that defensive coaching staff. I mean, you should never be worried about that side of the ball.
And absolutely. I mean, they've got a lot of new faces on the defensive side of the football because Dan Lanning left. He's now the head coach at Oregon, and I know that we're going to get into speaking of Oregon, that's who Georgia's going to see in the first game, and I know we're going to touch on that a little bit. But I know they've got a lot of young guys on that defensive side of the football. Chidera Uzo-Diribe, young guys as in coaches, that is. Chidera Uzo-Diribe stepping into a bigger role, now coming on as an outside linebackers coach. They lose Jamal Adai from the defensive backs. Fran Brown is coming in to help them there. Glenn Schumann taking on a bigger role than he ever has before, but he's been Kirby Smart's right-hand man for quite some time. Trey Scott has been questioned at times, but I don't think anybody's going to be questioning him after he has, 2-3 first-round draft picks on that defensive line. And like you said, having Will Muschamp, having Kirby Smart, having those defensive masterminds, as they were called last season, by those core players that we're now seeing off to the draft, having those guys will absolutely help this unit grow and develop into a Georgia defense that we're accustomed to seeing.
Yeah, that opener, there's a lot of familiarity with Georgia because you're going up against your former defensive coordinator, and of course, you're going to deal with the Bo Nix experience once again, which Georgia had no issues with while he was at Auburn. So I highly doubt they are worried too much. I'm assuming Bo Nix is going to be the starting quarterback at Oregon. I believe him and his dad would not let him go to Oregon if he did not think he was going to be the starter. I think I don't know this. This is just me saying this out loud. My assumption is he probably realized he was not going to be the quarterback at Auburn anymore. So anyways, Georgia had good success against Bo Nix. I'll just leave it at that, as and any Georgia fan out there. And it's going to be exciting to get that matchup to kick off next season. And this has been fun, Palmer, as always, having you on to talk all things Georgia football. I always enjoy. You do a great job breaking it all down. I think you gave us the whole roster here in this conversation here today, which you always do. You got it under, you know what's going on with Georgia football, and I always appreciate you coming on the show. If any listeners or viewers want to follow you online, where can they find you and check out all the work you're doing?
Yeah, over at DawgsHQ, we've got a great team. Me, Jake Roos handling recruiting for us, Wes Blankenship kind of being our do-it-all guy. And we've got big things coming up too. So, certainly an exciting season, that Georgia just had, an exciting season for us as we launched this new site under the On3 Sports Network, and bigger and better things are certainly on the way. So, Georgia, going to be competitive again, and DawgsHQ is going to be there every step of the way. You can find me on Twitter at Palmer Thombs, and like I said, you can find my work at DawgsHQ.
All right, sounds good. Everybody, go give Palmer a follow. Follow DawgsHQ. Georgia fan or not, go check it out. They're defending champs. They, need to see what's going on with Georgia. But once again, Palmer, thanks for the time, and appreciate it. Look forward to doing it again sometime down the road. And once again, thanks to Palmer Thombs for coming on this edition of Talking SEC. I always appreciate when Palmer comes on to talk all things Georgia football. Make sure to go check him out online and check out all the great work done over at DawgsHQ. They do a great job keeping you up to date on all things Georgia Bulldogs. Now, just a couple things I'll talk about here. Some basketball-related news. Kentucky is getting some big news on the basketball front. Oscar Tshiebwe is returning for his senior year. Of course, he was the consensus National Player of the Year in men's basketball. First Wooden Award winner to return since Tyler Hansbrough did that for North Carolina back in 2008. Oscar Tshiebwe said he wants to enhance his draft stock. He probably would be a second-round draft pick right now, and also NIL. That's got to be a part of it, because he can probably make more money on NIL than he would if he was a second-round draft pick going to go play in the G League. So now he can increase his draft stock, get better as a player, and perhaps be a first-round draft pick after another year of college. Of course, issue because he's a foreign student with NIL is a little bit different situation, a little bit tougher situation to do the NIL thing, though. But from everything, it looks like he will get some NIL money there, and Kentucky Wildcats got a top-notch player on their team next year, which they're used to having that anyway. They're going to have those players, but it's great for them having Oscar Tshiebwe coming back. We do have two spring games this Saturday. LSU and Ole Miss will be playing their spring games. I think the headline is going to be quarterback for both of them. Miles Brennan, of course, there, him versus Jaden Daniels. And the quarterback situation there at Ole Miss will be very interesting to see. And then just all the different players that Ole Miss has brought in from the transfer portal. So on Monday's podcast, we will talk about the two spring games. Any news that happens in SEC football or basketball will be discussed. And awesome guest on Monday's podcast. I will be joined for a long, lengthy, but incredible, insightful conversation with former Auburn offensive coordinator Al Borges. He was the offensive coordinator for the Auburn Tigers from 2004 to 2007. He was the coordinator in 2004 when Auburn went undefeated. We will talk about that team. He's got a book coming out, Deny of the Tiger, that's come out in August. We will talk about the book. We will talk about that Auburn team in 2004 and a bunch of other good stuff, Coach Al Borges. Like I said, it's a 50-minute conversation between the two of us, and you're really going to enjoy it. But that's going to do it for this edition of Talking SEC. You got to wait till Monday because that conversation is already canned, but you got to wait till Monday to hear me and Coach Al Borges have that discussion. Anyways, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, just wherever you get your podcasts, you can find Talking SEC. And please leave a review, subscribe, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. YouTube as well, the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel or the Talking SEC YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all the notifications, and leave a comment on a video, and I will read that on a future edition as well. Remember, you can always email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. I hope everybody has a great weekend. I'm going to go check out the Troy spring game on Saturday. But have a great weekend, and as always, let kindness be your compass.
Thank you for listening to Talkin SEC. Follow Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC and the show at Talkin SEC Pod. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time when we're talking SEC.